Okay, so welcome everybody. Here on the third stage of Hack Congress Paraonipolis 2019. I'm very happy that you stayed with us here in Institute of Crypto Anarchy, and I'm very proud that I can introduce and welcome here on the stage Markéta Dolejsova. Markéta is a design researcher with a background in human-computer interaction and food studies. I think the food studies will be something very important here, and you already see a little of broccoli behind me. Her research combines the methods of and techniques of research through design with ethnography to investigate the growing role of digital and biotechnologies in everyday human food practices. She is a co-founder of several independent design research collectives, including Hot Carrot and Open Source, Fermentation God Hub, Extreme Political Bistro, and Altap. She is a PhD in interactive media design at National University of Singapore for her doctoral project, Edible Speculations, designing for human food interaction. So, Markéta, floor is yours. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. So yes, thank you everyone for staying here for this slightly off-topic talk, maybe, as it can seem at the first sight, and thank you for having me. So I'm going to talk today about the paradoxes of personalized nutrition and diet hacking, which was research that I did as part of my PhD at the National University of Singapore. And just to give you a little bit of context, although Michael already did, what do I do? So I frame my research within the field of human-food interaction, which is a smaller subdiscipline of a larger field called human-computer interaction, HCI, which you might be familiar with. And what we do in HFI is we look at the growing and uncertain role of digital and biotechnologies in human food practices. So in the everyday practices around eating, cooking, diet planning, growing food, etc. So why food, right? Why should we bother? Or maybe why do I bother about food? I think this is very common sense, but well, food is a fundamental thing. It is a part of everyday life for the most of us. I guess everyone has some experience with some food. It is a source of joy and pleasure, but it is also increasingly a problem. And you're probably familiar with some of these problems, such as malnutrition or the unsustainability of our food consumption and production, or the insecurity which relates to the unequal access among socioeconomic classes to healthy and safe food. So these problems, similar as many other social problems, in the last decade became like object of interest of the entrepreneurs from the technological innovation centers, usually centered around Silicon Valley and places like that, who started suggesting and developing all kinds of solutions to simplify our food practices and solve these cumbersome global food problems. Okay, now we have a blackout. We have another blackout. Sorry. Yeah, should be fine. It's not really fine. Try again. Yeah, okay. So there is a great variety of these food techno solutions, ranging from technologies for personalized nutrition, such as nutrition trackers, all kinds of wearables, services that offer you to personalize your diet based on your DNA, to smart kitchenware tools such as smart or intelligent ovens, water kettles, or fridges, to all kinds of biohacked foods, supplements. We had self-biohacking panel down in the other room right now, right now, so people talk about it already. We have all kinds of foods that are developed to enhance our physique or our cognitive capabilities. And I'm just having a huge blackout all the time. Sorry for this. Okay, so this is not new, right? This idea of solving social issues in the food context is not coming out of the blue. It is part of this larger wave of neoliberal techno-determinism that the wave started in early 90s around the technological centers such as Silicon Valley, that was promising that social issues and problems can be fixed through purely technological interventions. And while these initiatives and efforts have been glorified to some extent, some people have also raised certain critique against such efforts. One of the most vocal critiques is Yevgeny Morozov, who is a political scientist from Ukraine, that was reminding us in 2013 that this techno-solutionism, as he calls it, might create a lot of unintended consequences and risks and issues. So instead of solving problems, these techno-solutions might actually create even more problems. And we know that, right? We talk about it quite often. We are aware of these unintended consequences. We are aware of the potential risks for us. And we are sort of afraid of them very often. But this is not my place to talk about this in detail. I'm using it here more as a context for my own research, or what motivates my own research in the food context, which is looking at the thin line between food technology innovation and food techno-solutionism. So the opportunities, but also limitations and risks that new technologies bring into our everyday food practices. And as I hinted at the beginning, I'm going to talk about personalized nutrition, which is a smaller scope of food technologies that are available on the market. So what is personalized nutrition? To say it very simply, it is the idea of adapting food to our personal needs and preferences, which might entail personalizing our diet according to our lifestyle preferences, such as, I want to be vegan because for ethical reasons. So I want to personalize my diet in a way that I will exclude any animal protein, or according to our biological determinants, such as our DNA or our metabolic traits, which is something that I will talk about a bit later. But in general, the central claim, the central idea of personalized nutrition is that the one-size-fits-all dietary guidelines slightly annoying. The dietary guidelines are issued by the food authorities, food and health authorities, such as the food pyramids and all kinds of plates that suggest that everyone should eat the same, everyone should have the same amount of calories and the same composition on nutrition, of nutrients on their plates is obsolete. And we would be better if we eat according to our specific personal traits. And just to give you a little bit of overview of what kind of technologies are actually available on the market these days, there are all kinds of nutrition trackers and diet logging systems which help you to track what you eat, count your calories, count your metabolic responses to your food, suggest all kinds of food products and food items that are specifically tailored to your preferences. There are also so-called nutrigenomics and nutrigenetics diets, which basically require you to submit your biological sample, such as, for instance, saliva, to some corporate laboratory where they analyze your DNA and send you back the analyzed DNA and diet recommendations. So what should you eat to feed your genes? The same thing works in the context of microbiome-based diets, where you send another type of biological samples, most often your feces, and you get your feces decoded, and you get your diet recommendations to eat to feed your microbes in your guts. So sort of build your gut garden. And then we have, last but not least, this category of personalized food products and supplements, where directly the food is personalized, such as like these vitamins that are 3D printed and personalized according to your blood glucose, or the food replacement Soylent, one of the complete foods products that is kind of popular on the market these days, or the personalized Nestle tea, which is basically customized to your DNA. So you can drink tea that is based on your DNA. So as you can see, there are many personalized nutritions and many promises that they make. The central promise, though, is that you can be empowered when you eat personalized food. You can get control of your diet, you can get control of your health, and by extension, you can get control of your life, right? I really like those claims that I just like screenshotted from some of the websites of the companies, such as be the master of your health, personalize your diet, be the best version of yourself possible through personalizing your diet. So these are like very, very empowering and very ambitious claims of what personalized nutrition can do to us. And all this motivated my curiosity, or was feeding my curiosity in learning something more about personalized nutrition. So I was quite interested in how does personalized nutrition fit into the everyday food lifestyles of people? How do you actually perform it in the everyday context? What advantages and challenges does it afford to its users? And who does that and why, right? So this motivated my first research study that I'm going to introduce here today, which was a study of complete foods. You might know complete foods under a different name. You might know it as Soylent, which is sort of more popular name for this kind of products. So Soylent was the first complete food available on the market in 2013. It was introduced as a powdered food replacement that is supposed to contain all essential nutrients that the human body needs to stay healthy and thrive. It was introduced by a young software engineer, Robert Reinhardt, who kind of claimed that he's, tired and bored with all the hassle around food, like cooking, eating, and thinking about what to eat to be healthy. So what he did is he took the USDA dietary guidelines for Americans and he translated them into a powder mix. So what he did is he took all the proportions of, your carbohydrates and fats and micronutrients, and he found powdered substances, mixed them together, and basically embodied the dietary guidelines in a powder. And he did the self-experiment of drinking the powder in a form of shake for 30 days, and then he reported the results on the internet in his blog post called "How I Stopped Eating Food." And it was awesome, right? He was saying my hair is shiny, my skin is glowing, I lost weight, I'm totally smart now, things like that. So obviously it attracted a lot of attention. He got some funding through some crowdfunding campaign and also from the Silicon Valley angel investors. So he eventually raised a lot of money and managed to open a startup called Rosa Labs and started producing and distributing his powder commercially. But what is important for us and what was interesting for me when I was looking into this was that he also claimed that his powder is open source, meaning that he shared his formula, his recipe online and said, look, you can tweak it, do anything you want with it. I want to, this is not fixed, this is just open to the world, you can play with it and customize it to your own needs. And people started doing it quite quickly. Quite quickly there emerged this large community of Soylent DIYers, as they call themselves, who started experimenting and creating new powders according to their own preferences, low-carb powders, high-protein content powders, vegan powders, etc. And some of them eventually started selling their powders commercially, which in 2019 resulted in kind of a huge global complete foods market where we have over 55 commercial brands selling their powders today. But the commercial distros are not so interesting for me, to be honest. I was really intrigued by this DIY community of people who started eating powders and experimenting with them. Buying all kinds of ingredients, mixing them together, and trying to figure out some kind of balanced meal for themselves according to their own preferences. So sort of playing some kind of nutrient puzzles, trying to be healthy and be the best version of themselves. And for this kind of geeking, they also established 3 discussion forums. One is called Discourse at Soylent, second was a subreddit forum, and third was developed by one of the really enthusiastic Soylent DIYers, Nick Polden, who created this forum called completefoods.co, where people actually share their recipes, like the full recipes of their customized powders. So this is example of one such recipe based on the original Soylent one, called Keto Chow. So it is ketogenic, right? So you can see that it has as the most important ingredients some protein powder, and then as a source of fat some heavy whipping cream. There is also a bunch of organic powders, solid powders, people trying to bake cookies from their powders, Also like trying to get superhumans through their powders, adding nootropics such as bromiracetam or noopept, etc. And this is another blackout. And this is like my little thing that I did with my co-author, Denisa, where we tried to create Soylent recipe based on our DNA. So we kind of connected the two things together. We got our DNA decoded, and we tried to design Soylent recipe that would really fit to DNA of each of us. So as you can see, from the first idea of like one powder fits all, Robert Reinhardt saying, listen, this is USDA guidelines translated into powder and you can drink it and be healthy. Soylent became like this complete foods community, became this great area for picky eaters, experimenting with all kinds of personalized nutrition products and recipes where, you know, the sky is the limit. Like basically people started making powders out of pretty much everything. And so that is the background of my study of this community, which I started in 2014, ended in 2017. It was done mostly in Europe, North America and Asia Pacific countries. What I did is that I interviewed 65 people, 40 of those were DIYers, who were active mostly in the first years of this whole phenomenon. 18 of them were owners of some kind of commercial distribution, commercial company, selling their powders. One of them was also Robert Reinhardt, the original founder, so I interviewed him as well. And the rest were customers, people ordering from one of those distributors, right? I also did content analysis of the 3 online forums, just to see what people are talking about there, what kind of ideas are they exchanging. And then I organized a bunch of workshops where we were playing with the powders. One of the workshops was actually organized here in the 2nd floor in Paralympolis. And I also conducted self-experiment where I probed the powders on myself. So I designed my own formula, and for 2 1-month-long periods, I was only eating my powder. And I did it mostly because I wanted to know what I'm talking about, right? So I developed this interest in this community, and I didn't want to be one of those researchers who just looks at some subject from a distance and doesn't have like first-hand experience. And what I was interested in were the motivations and experiences of people eating complete foods, and also the limits and advantages of this diet. So here in the next few minutes, I'm going to talk mostly about the findings from the interviews, because these eventually turn out to be the most important. So the motivations. Most of the motivations revolved around that sort of confusion and distrust with food, what food is today. Many people were saying things like, oh, well, I feel overwhelmed by the volume of misleading information that is provided about food, you know, by big food brands and also by governments. Some participants were highly skeptical about the official dietary guidelines in Europe or in US that are developed in the one-size-fits-all model. So most of the people use those guidelines, but they use them only as a baseline for their own self-experimentation, their own tweaking, basically, or diet hacking. And this was interesting because that sort of frustration with what food is, how much do people not understand what food is, and how much do they sort of want to escape from it, led to this weird thing where those people are deliberately abandoning what food is with all its social and gastronomical aspects and streamlining it into powder that pretty much doesn't have any taste, or at least it didn't at the beginning of this whole Soylent era. So as one participant mentioned, well, Soylent helps me, you know, to differentiate between food and nutrition. So these are no longer the same things. Nutrition is the stuff, the default stuff that my body runs on, and food is the fun part. Food is something that I do occasionally, like a festive thing. So complete foods for many people was a way how to, quote, escape the vicious cycle of crappy foods all around, to basically opt out from the system of mass food production and standardized food recommendation. The participants were also often saying that Well, you know, I trust myself much more than anybody else. I don't really care of what some health expert says. I really care about how my body reacts to what I eat. And there was this huge notion of self-trust, believing in yourself rather than some external system. And that was curious to me because most of these people are hobbyists, right? They are experimenters, but they don't have some kind of education in nutrition or food. So I was curious in how is it scaffolded, how this self-trust is built and scaffolded. And it was quite interesting for me to learn that through this self-experimental probing of diets, people learned a lot. Most of them claim that, you know, I definitely know much more about food and nutrition since I started eating powder, since I started, you know, tweaking it, playing with it, customizing the powder formulas, and seeing what kind of thing does it do to my body. So as one participant mentioned, you know, it is the same thing as if you hack technology. You need to understand it by yourself. Like, it's not your place to consume only what is out there for you. You can't trust it. You need to build it by yourself. And it's the same with food. You need to open the black box of food yourself and, you know, understand it by yourself. In this regard, very important was the online community gathered at the 3D forums, which I mentioned before. The forums are very active in terms of people sharing their experiences, sharing their ideas about food, sharing their self-tracking sheets as well. So logs of their metabolic data, how do they react to different powders, what kind of bad or good experiences they had with different nutrient compositions, etc. So the forums were very important for this self-trust building, where the people were saying, well, you know, this is very important because we as non-nutritionists suddenly can discuss the facts, whatever that is, and strike on our own. But for me, as sort of nutrition hobbyist by myself, at that time, it was kind of, you know, I was using the forums as well. I was using the DIY forum to design my own DIY Soylent formula because I didn't really know how to do it by myself. I was looking at the discussions, I was asking questions, seeking for help from others, but I was constantly worried with the think of, can I trust these people? You know, you don't know them. Some people, strangers online who are recommending you what to eat and whatnot. So I was asking about it as well during the interviews. And there was this recurrent motive again that, you know, whatever, I trust the community much more because we are like-minded people who are dedicated to self-experimentation. And I trust it much more than some health experts because they probably have some hidden agendas or health corporations, right? There were even some sort of, not totally far-fetched, for me it was quite interesting, ideas about complete foods as a start of some kind of citizen science experiment. This group of enthusiasts and people hacking their diets, experimenting with their bodies, can actually be quite useful, if you think about it, for the whole nutrition science, right? Because we are very limited now in terms of testing for various nutrients and various diets because clinical trials are terribly expensive and take super long time. So these people are suggesting that, you know, we kind of do that on our own. So if we somehow manage to build some system to systematize the way how we report our findings, systematize the way how we discuss our issues, have some protocols for self-testing, for instance, that would actually be quite useful. And we can actually try to do some sort of decent science here, which was great. On the other hand, that never happened. There were some people, this is a post, the picture from some PhD student from Washington University who posted in the forum saying that, oh, you know, I was thinking about that you are discussing this, issue here in this forum. So I designed this platform for self-experimentation where you can start comparing your results, you can start trying to build some kind of protocol or working on some protocol on how to report your results and turn it into something systematic. It never happened. It just stayed within the, you know, chit-chat in the forum. So that sort of even more amplified my curiosity about how do these people treat the risks in this diet. Because the diet, after all, is not confirmed by any clinical trials. We can't know if it is healthy or not. And especially in the context of the DIYers, we are mixing our powders in our kitchens and we think that we know what we do, but who knows? So when I was asking about that, what is your perception of the risks that you are potentially undergoing with your diet, people were saying bold things such as, oh, hacking the body is high risk, high reward. Some people even having some kind of like offensive reactions such as, oh, I know that there are some risks, but as long as I'm the only one affected, I can deal with these risks because it is my body after all, and nobody can sort of talk about, what should I do with this body. And this was all interesting and great and ambitious, but I was curious if what would these people do when they get sick. And it turned out that there is no exit plan. Most of the people, when I asked, were saying, oh, I don't know, I feel fine. But if I feel sick, I think I will go to see a doctor or someone, right? Which kind of doesn't make any sense because it's totally contradictory to what these people are preaching, right? The idea of opt-out, the idea of doing things independent on the state, depending just on a community of people gathered online, kind of failed in this context. Which is not a critique of that community, it is just an observation from this research, right? So one of the findings, or to summarize these findings from this case study, there are both interesting opportunities of this personalized nutrition, of like complete foods as an example of personalized nutrition, but there were also some limitations or flaws. So it was interesting how these people actually are opening the black box of what food is, because we don't really know what food is these days, right? And they felt empowered. They felt that they know more, but there were also huge risks, and people were kind of oblivious towards that. So there was personal empowerment, but there was also lack of personal responsibility of the consequences of these opting out actions. And another thing was that kind of, for me at least, scary comparison or gap between gastronomy and sustenance. How suddenly, silently, it became accepted that, oh, food can be powder, whatever. Food traditions, yes, sure. Gastronomy, sure. Whatever. So it was example for me of some kind of solution that was doing exactly what techno-solutionism is, solving food problems. How? By making the food disappear from your plate, right? Solving it by escaping it. Something similar to going to Mars and things like that. Okay, so that was the first case study. The second case study will be super short, so don't worry. It is an exploratory study that we just started a few months ago. It is more design-oriented, less ethnography-oriented as the first one. It's called Extreme Biopolitical Bistro. The bistro is black box. The bistro is this experimental nomadic food tech lab that we have and travel with from one place to another. Usually we present it at festivals and various cultural events because the goal is to provoke public engagement and participation in discussions about food technology issues. So the lab basically is composed of many different parts, many different stations or smaller labs, such as a lab where we speculate about possible food tech futures through tarot cards, or we build electrolytical candies that are conductive and react to your body when you are licking them, experiment with fermentation and all kinds of microbial hacks. And we also have a nutrigenomic lab, which is something that I'm going to talk about now, which entails personalizing our diets based on our DNA. So I sort of hinted that already with the DNA Soylent recipe that we did. That was with my collaborator Denisa that already is working with me on this project. So what we did to make this lab happen is we ordered the testing kits from company 23andMe, which is a commercial company, so we paid for that. We got our DNA decoded, and then we used three third-party services, Prometheus and Snipedia, to interpret these tests into diet recommendations. So we didn't do the usual thing that people do, like ordering the ready-to-use thing, ordering the ready-to-use solution, but you like test your genes and you get your diet immediately. But we did this whole job of trying to figure it out by ourselves, and it was heavy. So Prometheus is the system where you can upload your raw DNA data and you can go through all kinds of SNPs, so-called single nucleotide polymorphisms, which are the distinctions in our DNA that make us different from each other, and that are also linked to, you know, what you should eat and what you should not eat in the context of the nutrigenomic diets. So we did that, and we checked for our, you know, elevated risks for certain diseases such as obesity or diabetes 2, or our ability, expected ability to taste certain flavors. And through the system, compared also with SNPpedia, which is basically Wikipedia for SNPs, where you can just read about every single polymorphism, which is that long number and letters there in the corner. Based on that, we basically created a menu that was tailored to the DNA code of both me and Denisa. So the menu is made of the same ingredients for the both of us, but it has different proportion of ingredients based on our distinct DNA. So to give you a few examples, because obviously we're not going to read the whole menu here, let's say the dessert. The dessert was blueberries and blueberry cake, but because of one of us has a higher risk of developing diabetes 2 and become obese, that person got only blueberries and no cake, right? Because blueberries are low in sugar. The other person didn't have these issues, so she could have eaten as much cake as she wanted. The drinks were red wine. So one of us apparently has elevated risk to be addicted to tobacco and alcoholic products, so that kind of sucks, so, you know, no wine for you. What was interesting though, that the genes of this person suggest that, but also connected to like socioeconomic issues. There is a thing that if you have more than 12 years of education, there is much lower risk that you will actually become alcoholic because you are supposed to be educated, right? So actually, after all, we allowed for this person to have at least half of glass of wine because she has more than 12 years of education. The other diner, though, she has genes that suggest that she has a lower sensibility towards social critique. So there is this thing that she might not actually give a damn about, you know, people criticizing her. So she got a full glass, obviously, and opened up, because if somebody judges her drinking, she wouldn't care. So, you know, it was sort of provocative. But what we did with this was we presented this menu and the cooked meals at Biotopia Festival, which is where we run the first Extreme Biopolitical Bistro Lab. And we were asking people, you know, to suggest like tweaks for us, to like redesign the menu for us, suggest what we should eat and not eat. We created this huge Google document, which was linking all our genes and all our susceptibilities to some diseases and issues, and asked people to just play with it, tweak it, and react. So obviously the goal was to provoke discussion and some kind of critical hands-on activities around the whole idea of personalized diets. And for me, the sort of first motivation to do this project was when I saw this website, which is trying to introduce or promote this like new system of this chain of restaurants called Vita Mojo, who started partnering with DNA Fit Service, which is doing the DNA analysis. And in simple few steps, you can upload your genome there, and the system recommends you the best meal for you from the Vita Mojo menu. And for me, seeing how simple it is to share your DNA with someone just for the sake of convenience, just for the sake of having, you know, your fast, quick meal that is potentially personalized and amazing for you, it was sort of scary. So with the menu and with the whole project, we kind of wanted to draw attention to this whole data security and privacy aspect of eating according to your DNA. Because if you think about it, at the bistro, what we did is we shared quite sensitive information about us, right? We shared about one of us being potential fat alcoholic, the other one being totally oblivious of social critique and what people think about her. The other aspect was the kind of black box thing that I talk about in the context of Soylent. In this specific example, it is quite questionable if personalized nutrition is helping you to unblack box something or the other way around. Because what we got was, you can't eat cake, sorry. You can't drink wine, sorry, and that's all. And you are supposed to trust it, right? Because it's science. So for me, it is sort of questionable if it is empowering me of empowering somebody else. And the last aspect would be, it was kind of sad to eat together. The one person who didn't get cake was obviously very jealous of the other person who got her cake, right? So it was weird and uncomfortable to eat together the menu. So that opens the question about possible future. Whereas, are we still going to eat together in the age of personalized nutrition? And all these things in this very playful exploratory study provoked me to submit application, submit granting proposal for a DNA diet study, which is actually much larger study, which, if it gets funded, entails collaboration with genomic scientists and philosophers and designers, food designers. So that's something like a step for a future research that I hope will happen. And I will end with this future speculation now. Thank you for the attention. Thank you for bearing with me with this techno glitches. And open the floor for questions, obviously. Thank you.
So thank you, Markéta. So audience, now it's your turn. Any question? Thank you.
Hey, so when you first started doing your research into the personalized nutrition and the powders, were you looking for any particular effect, and when you did do your experiments, what was the effect that you actually got relative to what you were looking for?
So you mean effects on myself personally?
Yes. Yeah.
I did it really as a research experiment, so I didn't have any specific goals. The goal was, I would say, to just explore it by myself, if it is doable and if it is more or less hassle. Obviously, I screwed up many times while designing my own recipes. So it sort of showed me, that it's really not so simple. And it also, the issues around the trust in the Soylent community kind of highlighted for me this whole aspect of, should you rather trust expert food systems or something that we do ourselves? But I didn't have any specific motivation in terms of, I want to lose weight, I want to stop, eating meat, and I don't know how, so I would better drink powder or something like that.
What about the results? Did you feel healthier? Did you get sick? Did you, lose weight? What was the actual outcome?
Yeah, that was quite interesting. I felt quite good. I felt really good. So I guess it's very, again, personalized, right? So for me, while writing PhD, that meant that I'm sitting in front of the computer all the time and snacking on all kinds of stuff. So when I started drinking Soylent, it was suddenly simpler for me. But at the same time, it was obviously that whole social aspect of not being able to go for a dinner with my friends. That sucked, right? It felt like, I felt like I'm kind of doing some kind of self-tailorization, sitting at my desk and working and working and working and feeding myself with Soylent while my friends are having nice evening somewhere else.
Did you combine it with exercise or microdosing or something else that kind of expand the scope?
Oh well, I do exercise all the time, so that was just it was more of including this as part of the fitness routine. But with microdosing, I didn't do microdosing at that time, also because I was in Singapore. So
That penalty.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, we have now and there in back question.
Hi. So you mentioned that there is a lack of some sort of reliable clinical trial data, like some sort of reputable institution that would collect verifiable data. And
I didn't say that.
Stuff like DNA feed, it sounds really cool from the concept, but I am very skeptical towards it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want to ask is, don't you think that this should be the focus of the community? Well, perhaps if I can make a parallel with smoking, then maybe you will smoke all your life and you will never notice that there is some like increased lung cancer risk. So I think that just maybe the DNA fit, it could be missing a much bigger or more important general trend. And just I wanted to hear your opinion about on this.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with that. So the whole DNA diets, the whole nutrigenomics and nutrigenetics, it's now in the state of suggestions, right? Like
Yep.
what you get from the tests is just statistical probability that you will develop some disease. And you know, some people do crazy stuff when they get these things, like undergo double mastectomy because you might be a bearer of cancer gene and you might get breast cancer, but that's just a statistical probability that it can happen in your population group and you might be a carrier of that gene. And in the food context, this is where I see the whole nutrigenetics potential gets exploited by the commercial companies, because you can sell that idea quite easily, right? If you have that, if you are a carrier of the SNP that suggests that you might develop diabetes too, it's a sort of threatening thing. So you better buy our product and be safe. But that's definitely, it's not accurate at all. So this whole commercial area of personalized nutrition, gene-based personalized nutrition, is very much based on overclaiming the effects. And in the science community, there is a huge discussion, critical discussion about that as well, saying that it actually does not do justice to what we do here as scientists, because it turns it into this sort of hyped circus. So yeah, I would definitely say that, you know, I didn't mean to say that the DNA diets would be something that we should follow, or it is like ideal approach.
Right, I just thought it adds a lot of complexity to an already complex issue of nutritional science. So I was surprised that such an idea exists. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, we have one question here and then one in front.
Hi, I wanted to ask about the experiments people do, like how do they measure the outcomes? And especially the like long-term effects of the experiments.
In the complete foods community.
Yeah.
So from what I have seen, people usually track their like metabolic responses through trackers that are commercially available, like all kinds of variables, logging their also calorie intake and outmake in terms of fitness, and then sharing these sheets, these logs basically with the community and discussing them. So apart from doing this sort of DIY thing, they also often do like blood tests, which now you can do on your own as well, but it's still more conventional to go to do it with your doctor. So that's the main kind of tracking that I have seen in the community. And there is also the tracking of your mood, of your sleep, and of your sexual performance. That's very popular in the forum as well.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
Hi. I really like the idea of having my DNA sequence, but I don't like the idea to have it in some database associated with my name. So did you find some way to keep the privacy with some company that does this?
Well, the companies claim that they totally value your privacy and they will never ever share your DNA with someone, which totally doesn't happen ever, right? We have seen so many times that the 23andMe company, for instance, shared the customer data with LA police because of some crime investigation. So that kind of overrules, you know, the terms of and conditions of the data security and privacy. So that's obviously totally sketchy and totally scary, especially if you have this like candies that are kind of dragging you into, oh, upload your data here and you will get very easy lunch tomorrow. So, you know. So I didn't find any way how not to do that. The whole thing, I mean, just the thing of submitting my saliva to some anonymous laboratory was obviously a suicidal mission, but I did that as a sort of provocation for this project, thinking that, oh, what do I know? You know, what does the world knows about me? Probably a lot, so I can do that. But it was not done with the intention of becoming a better person myself or having a better health, but more as research project where we wanted to provoke some kind of reaction.
Okay. But if I could find some anonymous lab, I could totally upload those data to SNPedia or something and get results
Mhm,
without...
definitely. If
Okay.
you have access to any lab that can do the gene analysis for you, and there are many places where you can do also all kinds of like biohacking places, biohacker spaces, where you can do it. So that's possible.
Okay, thank you.
Although I also think that Prometheus got sold last week to some company called MyHeritage. So,
Oh, come on.
but I saw it just in the morning and I didn't check it, so I'm not sure. But check it.
Okay, we have one more question here. Okay, here you go.
I would say it's not a question, it's a contribution to your question and the answer. I would imagine that just to open a theoretical possibility, it would be an application of edge computing, like a device where you insert your DNA sequence and it's computed on this device directly and never shared with external companies, for example. Just to open that, like a device that knows your DNA, but maybe it's even hardware encrypted or things like that.
Well, I'm thinking that this community here might be sort of ideal place to discuss about these possibilities, right?
Okay, we have question here in back.
Yeah, I have one more question. So what are the best nutritional studies that you are aware of, or maybe some that have some non-trivial results?
Oh, there are so many.
So what
So-
is, can you pick some that like educate us or something? I don't
All
really know
right.
any.
Well, I'd like to share a reading list or something. If you go, if you search for, let's say, the gene-based personalized nutrition, or look at the, sometimes it's also called precision nutrition. If you would be looking for it in Google Scholar, let's say, you get a bunch of quite interesting studies, and you need to figure out by yourself by looking at it first and seeing if the study is somehow critical. I mean, that's a thing for me, where I usually, you know, decide if it is worth reading for me or not. If I see that they are actually talking skeptically about this whole idea and science themselves, that's a good sign for me. But there are so many. Like I can show you what
So
I
you
read
don't
later. But
don't want to mention one or two, or do you just nothing's coming up in your mind maybe?
oh, I see your point. No, a lot of is coming up. I don't know. I don't really want to do like promo to other people, but look at publications of Jose Ordovas, for instance. He's becoming like a big name in the personalized nutrition area. He's also in some advisory committee of a company called Nutrigenomics. So that's interesting, right? So he's part of this commercial company, and he is also looking at it from the other perspective. So that might be even a promise of some kind of future development of this area of personalized or precision nutrition. We will see. But check his publications.
Cool,
There is
thanks.
a huge book by Lynn Ferguson called Nutrigenetics and Nutrigenomics, I think in everyday food practices. That's a huge book. Kind of a lot of basic information as well.
Okay, I need to have a last question. Do you still eat some Soylent or Mana or any other branded?
No.
No.
So the thing also is that the whole DIY community kind of is,
Okay.
you know, silencing down because of the growing popularization and commercialization of the whole field. So it's these days so easy to buy some ready-to-use product, which is totally not interesting for me because I was not doing it for the personal effect on my health, but more for the DIY self-experimentation aspect. So, nope.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So with Mario ended with hack the state call. I think this is more like hack your body or hack your diet or hack your food. So thank you, Markéta. Thank you
Thanks.
for sharing with us.